Okay, why don't we dive in? It's great to have you all here. My name's John Kamen. We'll do a quick introduction in a moment. Thanks for joining the Wholesum webinar. It looks like we've got about 45 people signed up for the webinar today. A handful of folks will be joining us live, and then we'll get the recording out to the rest of you all soon. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I jump in. So this webinar is going to be recorded, so we'll be sending out a copy of it to everybody who registered after it's done. That'll be today or sometime tomorrow. And the other thing I wanted to mention before we jump in is that you all should be able to see a kind of a chat option at the bottom of your screen. So if at any point you have a question or a comment that you want to add, feel free to just enter it in the chat there, and either Grace or I, who are on the call today, will do our best to address it if we can. So without further ado, let's jump in. A quick introduction, the Wholesum team on the call today. My name's John Kamen. Grace is joining me. Grace, we have you on as well.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome.
It's great to have you all here. So Grace and I started Wholesum 9 years ago, I think, this year. So we're coming up on our 10-year mark next year. And it came out of a place where both Grace and I were working in sort of the group meal planning world. Myself, I was working in sort of the outdoor education space, and Grace in an early childhood education world. And we just realized that there were a lot of folks in the industry struggling with planning food for groups. And so as kind of a tech nerd myself, I was deep into Excel spreadsheets trying to solve this problem, as I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with. And at that time, we decided, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we started Wholesum as a way to do that. And it's been a great experience so far, working across a lot of industries. I looked at the list of folks joining us today, and it's a fun mix of, there's some current Wholesum users, which is great to see, just sort of brushing up on skills and refreshing those, and then some people that are new to the community as well. And it seems to cross a pretty wide set of industries, from sort of outfitting and rafting and kind of outdoor tripping to university programs. We have a handful of summer camps and ranches on the call as well. So that's fun to see as well. Grace, do you want to give a quick introduction or add anything to that before we jump into the demo?
No, I think that sounds good. I guess maybe I'll just say, because we have these 9 years under our belt now, which is crazy to hear, we'll kind of go over the basics today, but we do have a lot of good resources, or can connect with people directly, specific solutions for different industries, or kind of we know that each organization or company kind of takes their own approach, and you'll see as we kind of dig into it how we've built Wholesum in a way that's quite adaptable. So just to say that you'll kind of see some of that, and then we also have resources and opportunities to connect with us to continue to kind of tweak things around your particular needs and industry.
Yeah, and we're a really small team, so at any point you're welcome to. I'll list my email here at the end of the presentation. You're welcome to reach out to me or to Grace at any time. Our contact information is on the website as well. So let me jump to this overview real quickly, just to show you kind of the plan for today. So we've talked a little bit about Wholesum. I want to do this kind of second and third bullet I wanted to share with you as some of the basics of using Wholesum. So the goal as we built Wholesum is to make it sort of scalable to your needs. So you can keep it pretty simple and streamlined to just scale recipes to your group size and get those shopping lists done. And there's also a lot of power to it that we can optionally turn on. So my hope is to introduce, for those of you that aren't familiar with Wholesum yet, introduce you to sort of the basics of it: recipe creation, managing your ingredients, making meal plans, generating shopping lists, sort of the core functions of Wholesum. And then as we dig in, time permitting or whatever questions you have, we'll jump into some of the more advanced features and whatnot. In the last year or so, we've added a number of features, especially related to recipe creation, that I'll also demo with you. And it opens up kind of a world of recipe ideas that will intersperse along the way as well. From there, I want to take a little bit of time to focus on dietary restrictions. I know that is for a lot of you all, that's one of the biggest pain points that you have in planning food for a group. Different dietary restrictions changing with each group, and how we can set up Wholesum to manage that more effectively. So we'll take some time to focus in on that as well. And then that last bullet, we can kind of make it our own based on what questions you have and what time we have to talk about some of the additional features of Wholesum, what we can turn on, how we can tweak it, some tips and tricks, and then we'll end with some pricing and options so that you can find the right subscription model that works best for you. So let's jump into these first two bullets of sort of recipe ideas and the main core functionality of Wholesum. So I'll jump over to Wholesum here quickly. So Wholesum is one thing I wanted to mention too, if you're up for it, those of you that are on the call, feel free to drop your company name and where you're calling in from in the chat. It's always great to see sort of which communities are present live for us. So if that's something you're comfortable with, feel free to drop that in the chat, and it'd be great to just share that, but no pressure either way. So very quickly, this is Wholesum. It's an online tool. This is what I'm looking at right now is my test account. This is basically the dashboard. And what I'm gonna demo for you primarily today is this top row. And our general process here is that we are gonna build out our recipes. So we're gonna source them from multiple different sources that I'll show you in a little bit. We're gonna build out the list of recipes that we might serve to our groups. As we do that, it's gonna automatically build out this list of ingredients. So the ingredients are basically this is a place where you can spend as much or as little time as you want. It's a place to say, here's the store we buy it at or the vendor we purchase it from. This is the brand we typically use. Here's what it costs. You can really sort of build out the details if you want to on the ingredients tab. And both of those are sort of upfront homework. It takes some time to sort of build it out. But then once that's done, we'll spend most of our time here in the meal plans where we can really get our sort of streamlined menu plans. I'm going to change it up today a little bit and actually start here at the meal plans just to show you where we're going. So if you haven't used Wholesum, you can kind of see the end result and get a sense of why we take our time to build the recipes and ingredients and dial it in for your own case. So let's jump into meal plans really quickly. I'm going to do this sort of in a backwards way so that you can see where we end up. So these are my meal plans. These are my groups that I'm feeding. On the left, we've got some folders that we can use to just keep these organized, where we can drag and drop different recipes to keep them orderly, whether that's by year, or maybe you've got some template meal plans you build from. And on the right are the specific groups where we have, set dates for when we're going to be running these different groups or trips. And I can make copies of these or edit them, delete them. But I'm going to start by just making a new one. And you'll see why we build out our recipes and ingredients first. I already have this account set up, so I can jump straight to the meal plan part. So we'll just say webinar demo is the name of the group. We're going to define the number of people in the group. I'm going to say we have 25 people in this group. We can do that by appetite size if we want to. And then we're going to say of that group size, let's say 25 people, how many of them don't do these dietary restrictions? So there's this list here of some of the most common dietary restrictions. You can adjust this if you want to. And we can start saying, we've got 3 people that don't do dairy and 5 that don't do wheat or gluten. And Wholesum as a system is going to automatically adjust the ingredient quantities to make sure that we're going to bring the right gluten-free ingredients, the right dairy-free ingredients, if you've set up the rules to do that for us. And then the last step here is really to set up your group. So I'll say I've got a 3-day group planned, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. And then on the left are all the recipes that I added to my account in that first step that I'll share with you in a minute. So I can say, let's just look at our breakfast options, and we'll do some of these. We can throw in some lunch options. You'll see some flags here saying, hey, this might have some possible dietary restriction. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. I'm just going to pull a bunch of these in here so you can kind of get a sense of what we're working with. You can do multiples, obviously, in the same group, and we can go from there. So pretty simple. This will be our meal plan for this trip. And then the last step is saying, okay, you've got 25 people. We're assuming everyone is eating everything. If for some reason that's not true, I can back these out and say, okay, this is our plan for the 3 days of who's eating what. And what we'll end up with is the final meal plan pretty quickly. And we can view it here on the screen, or I often just jump to the PDF to take a look at what we've got. And what it's going to start with here is the shopping list or the packing list. So this is a great way to kind of get a list of what you need to have prepared in order to feed that group. We can have it sorted by store or by department. We'll be able to see, for each ingredient, the jars of pesto sauce, how much do we need for this meal versus how much do we need for this meal. So it'll break it down by recipe. And there's a lot of other columns we can add here if we want to see the brand, if we don't want to see metric, if we want to see some notes about the ingredient, you can add those here. So this is our full list of the shopping list for the trip. We'll get our meal plan. So this is what we just created in that previous screen, along with how many people are eating each one of those meals. And then you'll also get the recipe scaled up. So here's what bacon and eggs looks like for 25 people. It'll scale the recipes to the appropriate size for your group. And if you've added instructions along with that recipe, you'll get those printed out as well. So you can really just, print this out and hand it out or hang it up so that we've got a good sense of what we need for that trip or for that group. So that's a really quick, I know I ran through that quickly, that's a really quick demo of where we're going. What I want to do is back up now and come back to what it took for us to get there. So as I mentioned, our process here is to get the recipes in there, manage the ingredient details, and then we'll end up with that meal plan process. So let's start with the first step, and I'll back up to that. So you saw that list of recipes that I was adding to the meal plan. That all came from this list. This will be blank when you start your trial account. And you get to build this out in whatever way you want to. So using the recipes that you want to use. And there are a number of different ways to get recipes in here. And so I wanted to do a quick demo of a few of those ways so that you have a sense of your options. So the most straightforward way is to just create it manually. So if you already have a recipe, written on a piece of paper or in a cookbook or in a spreadsheet that you really want to put into Wholesum, you can always come in here and just create it manually. So that's just a matter of naming it, add the various ingredients. What is the unit for that ingredient? We've got weights and volumes and these whole packages and boxes. You can name the ingredient. As I type it, it's going to look in my other recipes to see, okay, what ingredients am I using elsewhere in this in Wholesum that I might be able to borrow. And then you'll set up the serving size as well. So I'll jump to one that I already have set up, this bagels and cream cheese, which is a great example of a simple recipe. So I have this set up for 10 individuals with 1 package of cream cheese and 10 whole bagels. Now it doesn't particularly matter what the serving size is here because the meal plan, as you saw, is going to scale this up and down. So the real goal is to just make sure that the quantities of the ingredients are proportional to the number of individuals served. Make sure this is an appropriate amount of food for this number of individuals. If you think about this differently, for example, maybe you have your system set up in per person quantities, you absolutely can create a recipe for 1 person and it'll scale it up later. Or if you use much larger groups and you think in terms of recipes for 100 people, you can build a recipe for 100 people and it'll scale it up and down when you actually get to your group size. So that's a really helpful piece. This is where we can add our instructions. We can flag some dietary restrictions, categorize it, and also put in any custom tags that we want to keep things organized and easy to find. The last thing I'm going to say about this in terms of creating and adjusting recipes manually is this substitute column. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we get to dietary restrictions. But I wanted to flag it now that we can, for each one of these ingredients, we can jump in here and set up a rule to say, If for bagels, if somebody doesn't eat wheat or gluten, let's substitute that ingredient for that individual with a gluten-free bagel instead. So that's how this sort of pours through to that meal plan process. Is we set up the rules here, and then when we add another person with a gluten-free a gluten intolerance, it will substitute that gluten-free bagel in there. So that's one process. I'll come back to my recipes here. So you can add and edit these recipes manually. That's one obvious way, and honestly, it's a great way to start to just sort of build your foundation as a recipe.
Can I
And
hop in real quick here?
yeah, for sure.
Just piggybacking on what you were already saying, this manual entry option is a great way for those of you who, like John already said, like have recipes that you've already tested, you already like. It's a great way to kind of get those in here. And if you kind of think of Wholesome as a database, being able to go in there and start this manually gives you a lot of control. It keeps your database very clean because you're kind of starting it from scratch. That said, it also takes a little setup time on the front end, just with any database, quote unquote, where you're kind of getting your information in there, and then once it's in there, you can edit, scale it up and down in any number of ways for all of the future. So that manual entry is kind of how Wholesome started because those companies that we were working with quite often had their own recipes and kind of wanted to start from scratch, but not everyone is in that particular place. So we've got these other options as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Grace. Yeah, and one thing that we try to really hit home with new Wholesome users is the importance of getting your units and your ingredient names correct in the way that you want them to show up on your shopping list. So everybody does this different. If you're buying cream cheese by the ounce, then we want to use those correct units. So that's one of the reasons we often suggest starting out manually to just kind of get a bearing on what are the naming conventions and what are the units that really make sense for my organization. The other ways to create recipes. So one that we added in here last year that's been really helpful is from a URL. So almost any recipe that you find online, you can import into Wholesome. And I've dug this one up just as an example. There might be a bunch of ads and different ingredients and instructions that we need to copy over there. If we ever wanted to import this, we can just copy that URL and put it in here. And what this should do is clean it up and put it into the format that Wholesome expects, as you can see kind of below that pop-up. And then this pop-up shows up basically as an effort to make sure that we keep our ingredient list really clean. So in this example, the recipe that I just imported is calling for mild pork sausage. Well, it looks like we have ground pork sausage being used in another recipe right now. And so it's going to give me the option of saying, do I want to create a new ingredient for this? Is this something separate that I buy separately from other ingredients used in other recipes, or do I want to use an existing one? And I'll walk through this to sort of say, okay, is a medium onion the same? Yeah, that's the same as an onion. Let's go with that. And we can walk through this to really add in all of the ingredients in a clean way. Medium bell pepper, is that the same as one of these? Yes, bell pepper. Great.
And
So, yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
John,
No worries.
uh, when you're saying in a clean way, and when we're seeing this process take place, or when you saw during the manual entry a little box pull up related words, all of this is, and you'll see this again in a few steps, is so that when you do this shopping, wherever possible, you can be really simply aggregating the total amount of any particular ingredient that might be in multiple recipes. So this is a way to just really streamline that shopping experience and potentially storage, depending on how you do that. So I just wanted to clarify the benefit of this. And when you say kind of making sure it's clean, it's that step when we're aggregating all of your recipes for that shopping trip or um, that trip. If four different recipes have rice, then you only have to buy that rice, one time. So I just wanted to
Yep,
talk.
that's great. Yeah, so piggybacking on that, what we don't want to see on the shopping list is white rice, rice, bag of rice, where it shows up as many different ingredients. You want to be able to purchase that quickly and know the right quantity that you need to buy for the right ingredient. So that's an effort to sort of merge these recipes into your own business process. So that was from URL. We've done manually. I wanted to show the collections quickly. We've had a lot of companies that use Wholesum that you'll see here that have offered to share their recipes. So if you see an organization on this list that sort of aligns with your own practices, you can hop in here and find a recipe that's already being used. It has instructions in there, and we can go through that same process to basically align the ingredients from that recipe with the ones that you're using in your own system. So that's another great way to get some ideas, is to find other companies using Wholesum that have offered to share theirs. A lot of these are sort of in that the outdoor education and outfitting space. So it's a great place to start as well. The final way is, so we've talked about manual, we've talked about from URL, and we've talked about from collections. There's also a way to generate it automatically. So I can just say, Dutch oven breakfast. We'll just go with that. And you can basically type in the name of any recipe. And what this process will do is look to try to find existing ingredients from your recipes that you're already using, and then it'll create a recipe based on the ingredients already being used and add ingredients where needed, draft instructions for you. So this is a pretty powerful tool to get you sort of a first stab at a recipe option that you can modify from there to see if you like it or change it or remove things or add things. So those are some of the ways that you can get recipes into Wholesum. There's a lot of different tools and tricks that you can lean on there.
And I would just add, if you want to not click away real
Yeah,
quick, that up at the top of this page in orange, you can see instructional video. We've tried to
yeah,
make everything really user friendly each step of the way, because we know once you're just at the beginning of getting used to it, that having a little hand to hold can be really helpful. So in each of these pages, we have resources for you to check out. We have a really thorough a kind of general page where you can go and look up all of our resources as well. So just to reiterate, because we're a small team, we're very available to you, but at the same time, we've also tried to do the upfront work of giving you all of the resources you may need. And that's one place where you can find them.
yeah. I'll pause there for a second to see if there are any questions. Feel free to drop anything in the chat if you're seeing anything, if you want me to go revisit any of those processes. Otherwise, I can move on to the ingredients page. No questions so far, so maybe I'll keep running. Okay, so we've added our recipes. It's time to do the ingredients management portion of this. And again, this is sort of an optional step. You can add as much or as little detail as you want here. But basically, as I've added those recipes, it will automatically create a list of all of the ingredients across all of the recipes. So you'll see here's the bagel from Bagels and Cream Cheese. If it's a recipe that is in multiple, like butter, that is in multiple, if it's an ingredient in multiple recipes, you'll see those recipes listed here. And this is a place where we can rename that ingredient. We can define the store or vendor where we purchase this ingredient. We can put in the department to indicate, where do I typically buy this within that store. And the hope is really that the shopping list can be sorted by this. So you can pull a list of just Costco items sorted by the department with all of the quantities that you need for that group. There is also, last year we added this ingredient info tab. So this is a place where you can add even more information. So as an example, I'll open up bagel. We can type in the brand of bagel that we typically buy. If you're working with a vendor directly, you can put in the item ID number or the item ID for that specific product, or even link to the URL if it's an online store. If you're doing in-person shopping, you can add the aisle number here so that if you know it's at the grocery store in aisle 4, you can add that here and sort your shopping list by aisle and really make it quite easy to find. And then the bottom here is if you do need to do some purchase unit conversion, you can do that down here. We can come back to this one as one of the sort of advanced features. But the main takeaway of this page is it's a place for you to add a bunch of details, notes over here, whatever you need to add so that the shopping list contains all of the information that you need to really quickly find and purchase the ingredients you need for that group. I'm seeing a question from Rob in the chat. If your group size is 20, but for one night of the trip there's 10 additional guests expected, total of 40, can you scale up just one meal plan? Kind of. So yeah, let's jump back to the meal plan. That's a good segue. So we've got our recipes in there, we've managed our ingredients, and then I already demoed this meal plan, but let's come back to it just so that it all comes full circle. So I will edit this meal plan, webinar demo. And basically, Rob, to your question, so we're saying it's a group of 25, but one night we have 35 people. How would we handle that? The best way to handle that is to always enter the maximum amount up here. So I could say that this is for 35 individuals, and then I may only be serving 25 for some of these. So for each one, we just scale it back to the number of people being served, and then you can accommodate it that way. This section won't allow you to go higher than the number that you indicate up here. So you always want to start up here with the maximum group size. Hope that answers your question. Yeah, so coming back to this, we ran through this once already, but just as a reminder, appetite size, you can add some notes here about the specific dietary restrictions in the group, preferences that individuals have, if there's any notes for the person that's doing the shopping or packing or feeding, you can add those here about the group. And then you indicate the dietary restrictions. As we mentioned, this is what interacts with those rules that we set up. So for gluten-free bagels, for example, the higher I go here, or for the bagels and cream cheese recipe, the higher I go here, it's going to decrease the normal bagels and increase the gluten-free bagels. And then, yeah, we can drag and drop our items over here. These we can rename if we wanted to. So some people do this in a different order, or they want to have an appetizer and a dinner combined, or they need to track their beverages over here. So you can customize this both per recipe, but also the defaults for your business here. We have day numbers here. So if you'd rather do by date, a specific date here versus day number here, we can do that. I saw in the comments that there are some folks joining us from Australia, and I know one of the requests that's come in more recently is to change the date format, since this is a sort of a US format of month, day, year. And in the coming, let's say month or so, we're going to introduce a feature to reverse that so that you can do day, month, year, if your country uses that format. So that's on the horizon, which is exciting. Yeah, and then this is that section that we mentioned where you can see the individual served.
And I'll just hop in and reiterate. I know we started here, and we're kind of not ending, but like we're here right now. And just to say that once you've got all your information in there, your recipes kind of sorted out to your preference, you might occasionally go in and update an ingredients section because maybe the aisle changed or you decided on another vendor. All of that to say that's kind of the upfront work or a little bit of maintenance here and there, but it's this section, the meal plan section, where past that initial setup and occasional maintenance, you'll spend most of your time, and that time goes really quickly. This is kind of where the magic happens for Wholesum, and where you're kind of using the power of what you get in there to then adapt to the needs of your group or your month or kind of however you have it set up as you go forward.
Yeah. I'll pause there for questions as well. Thanks, Grace. So we've gone through kind of the whole process from a simple standpoint. And before I go further, if there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we can jump on to um, a quick focus on dietary restrictions.
And maybe if while people are thinking about what they might want to put in the chat, um, and I'll try to keep my eyes on it too. I didn't see the last one that came up, so if you want to send it out to the full group, I might be able to see it better that way, and I can bring that up. But just to say, when we originally built Wholesome, we built it rather simply. Um, oh,
Oops, are you back,
sorry.
Grace? Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
No, I
Thank you.
switched, yeah, I switched to the
I'm
panelist so you can see the
officially a
questions.
panelist.
Yeah, no worries.
Now I can see those. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just trying to make the point. We originally built it relatively simply based on the specific needs of those companies that we were working with. But over the last many years, based on the feedback of many different industries and many clients, it has become more powerful with a lot of adaptability. So when John was kind of talking about the simple way, it might not even seem very simple. There is a lot to kind of keep track of there. But we've been able to create a lot of adaptability over the last several years based on feedback, based on needs, based on different industries. And that's kind of one of the things that we'll jump into here. But we kind of try to create the base as relatively straightforward while you're getting used to Wholesome as a new tool for you and your organization or your company. But that adaptability will, as you dig into it or talk to us or kind of look into the help and support section, you'll see how we can get much more advanced and specific to your particular needs.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Grace. And on that note, let's jump into dietary restrictions quickly. I've shown you some of the tools already for this. Let me pull this over very quickly just to share it with you. When we work with our users, we often talk about the three different ways of managing dietary restrictions, and I've shown you most of these tools already, but let's just call them out. So one is kind of the lowest common denominator strategy. So what I mean by that is a good example of that is a peanut allergy. So a lot of times if you've got a severe anaphylactic allergy in your group, you might just exclude that any recipe that has any of those ingredients completely. So peanut allergy, we're just going to get rid of any recipes that have peanuts in them whatsoever. So that's one strategy. This works great for peanuts, but it often gets a little bit tricky if you're going to be lowest common denominator for gluten and for vegetarian and for dairy. It starts to make a pretty small subset of recipes that will meet that strategy, but it's a good one to employ in certain circumstances. The other one is meal substitution. So an example of this would be like somebody's going to do, like we're doing pasta for dinner. It's maybe a beef pasta, and if you are not able to eat gluten or you're vegetarian, we're gonna have this other meal option. It's not that we're adjusting the pasta recipe for you. We're actually gonna just serve a completely different meal for those people that can't eat the pasta dinner. So they might serve a rice-based vegetarian meal or something like that as an alternative. So that's what we typically call the meal substitution strategy. And then the ingredient substitution one is more and more common. And this is the one that I demoed for you already, which is basically to say, okay, we're doing bagels and cream cheese. If you don't eat gluten, we're going to bring a gluten-free bagel. If you don't eat dairy, we'll do a hummus instead of a cream cheese or something like that. So you've got these alternative, everyone's eating the same meal. We're just substituting ingredients based on your needs. So you can kind of pick and choose a combination of these along your Wholesome journey, but we have tools to manage each one of them. So let me show them quickly on the actual meal plan. So the common denominator one is basically a tool over here where we can actually filter out the recipe list. So I've got my categories, meaning breakfast, lunch, dinner. Oh, this is popping up on a different window, but I can basically filter out my down to my breakfasts. I can filter by tag, but I can also filter by doesn't contain. So you probably can't see this because it just popped up on me. But if I wanted to filter out my nut recipes, I can filter out any meal that doesn't contain tree nuts. And this will just show me the ones that are tree nut free. And that way I don't even make the mistake of, and I don't have to review each recipe to make sure it's nut free. So that can be a really helpful way to do it. So that's step one, or that's option one, the common denominator strategy, is to just remove those recipes from the plan completely. You can also monitor it with this little flag just to make sure we're not putting any conflicts in there. So this is just flagging to say this recipe contains an ingredient that might conflict with one of your dietary restrictions up above. It won't stop you from using it, just calling your attention to it. The second option here is this meal substitution. So that's when we're serving two different meal options. So we talked about this already, but a good example of that would be this spaghetti and meatballs for lunch. And maybe we're going to serve rice and beans as an alternative. And so we'll add two meals to that. And then when we get down to that section of the meal plan, we'll just say, okay, 30 people are having spaghetti and meatballs and 5 people are having rice and beans. So this is a way to just serve different quantities of different meals for that same meal time. So that's number 2. And then number 3 we talked about. So to show you how that one works in action, I think I put the bagels and cream cheese recipe in here. That was the substitute rules, where we define at the recipe level that we're going to substitute gluten-free bagels for gluten-free bagels. And what that looks like in practice is when I actually look at the shopping list and the recipe list, is you'll see, I'll search for it. We've got 8 gluten intolerant folks, and we should have some gluten-free pasta here that's substituted out. And gluten-free bagels, we've got 8 gluten-free bagels that are substituted into the shopping list automatically. And you'll see that on the recipe as well, that if we find the bagels and cream cheese here, we should have, it's for 35 people. We're going to bring 27 whole bagels. And for those 8 people that don't eat gluten, we're going to bring the gluten-free bagels as a substitute for the bagel. So that's that third option. It's the same recipe. We're just going to substitute the ingredients. So that's a great tool to kind of just see. These are a combination of tools to sort of deal with the dietary restrictions that come up for your group. So I'll pause there. Again, if there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to jump on to some of the other more advanced features of Wholesum. And I'll breeze through some of these because we have great documentation on each one of them. I don't want to spend too much time diving in unless you have specific questions. But as Grace mentioned, we've added a lot of power that you can sort of optionally turn on. And some of those are particularly helpful that I wanted to call your attention to in case you need it. So the first thing I'll show is that there's a settings section. And at any point you want to, there's this list of settings, and there's pieces that you can turn on and off if you choose you need them or not need them. And so we can run through a bunch of these, but starting at the top, so recipe sharing, that's basically allowing you to share your recipes with the community should you choose to do that. Export settings, this is a place where we can decide which columns show up, how are we sorting the shopping list. We can really customize the output of that meal plan. And you can set up your default column labels. You can adjust your dietary restrictions. So you can really make this your own if you have changes that you need from the standard that comes here. Substitute ingredients, we already talked about that. Ingredient rounding is a great tool that is you may have noticed on the shopping list, there might occasionally be a strange, 6 1/4 packages of bacon, and you just want it to say 6 or you want it to say 7. If you need that turned on, you can turn it on here and then manage that from the ingredients page, where you can define for each ingredient whether it should round up or round down. So that can be a really helpful tool to just keep the quantities accurate. And then export customization, I showed this to you already a bit, but this is basically, this is maybe one of the most helpful tools out there. And it's a place where it allows you to pull lists by store, pull lists by department. If you're using dates, you can do it by start date or end date. You can pull just the shopping list or just the calendar, so you can really export exactly what you need into a spreadsheet or into a PDF. So rather than just pull a list for the meal plan in PDF or a list for the meal plan in spreadsheet, you can do it by store or by date or by department. So that's what that tool does, and that can be really helpful. The other piece that's related to that, that a lot of people find value in, is this. I'm looking at my meal plans right now, and this is a list of all of the meal plans I have coming up. But maybe your organization doesn't shop for each group separately. Maybe you're shopping for the month and you've got three or four different groups going out this month. Or maybe you're purchasing a bunch of ingredients before the season starts and you want to buy all of your bulk items pre-season. This pull combined list is a great tool to basically say, okay, I'm shopping for these 3 trips at once, or these 3 groups at once, and I'm going to Costco. So it really lets you combine shopping lists into one sort of parent shopping list for all of the groups. It also can be a great way if you're using sort of a templated approach where you say, here's my 3-day group that is my general group size and approximate meal plan that I'm going to serve over and over and over again. You can also use this preseason to say, I know that I'm going to have 30 of these in the coming few months, and I'm going to Costco and I need to buy all my bulk items. So this is a great way to combine the lists, to multiply the lists, and to really focus in on the ingredients you need to get accurate quantities before the season or while you're in flight. So that's that export settings. That's going to be really helpful. I'll pause there. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. I think I might leave the rest of these to, unless you have specific questions around these, to point you towards the support articles for these. These are really kind of nuanced features that can help you either with packing, if this is often used by rafting outfitters when they have specific coolers or specific bags that ingredients need to be packed into. Batch recipes are great for Dutch oven or baked goods that just scale a little bit differently, and I'm happy to walk through those if anybody on the call would like me to. And then there's some other options here about how to start at day 0 instead of day 1. So that's a really quick dive into each feature. But one of the things I wanted to call your attention to is, if you want to go deeper into one of these that I just breezed past, this help and support page, we've done our best to document basically every feature that Wholesum has with some written and, where appropriate, a video. So for example, if you really want to dig into the batch recipes after this call, we've put together a quick 5-minute video to give you a summary of how this works so that you can dig into that as needed. And we've got that for just about every feature on that settings list, as well as some that are kind of little tips and tricks that you might encounter along the way. Okay, so I'll pause for questions. That was most of what I hoped to cover today. And I wanted to move on to just sort of the next step. Oh yeah, it looks like we've got one coming in. If I combine meals for 3 groups departing on the same day, will it reflect each group's ingredients or just show me the total ingredients? That's a good question. So let's jump back to that. So the question is, if we're combining groups and these 3 groups, let's say, are starting on the same day, will it show each group's ingredients or just show the total ingredients? When I pull this, it will show the total ingredients that you need to purchase. And then what I need to do if I'm going to pack for a specific group. So this would be the list I bring to the store to go buy all of the ingredients I need for each, for all 3 groups. And then I can pull each individual meal plan separately to get the group specific list. So this is a way to basically say, I shopped for those 3. Now it's time for me to pack or separate the food for this one group. And this will be the list of what needs to be pulled out. So it's sort of a 2-step process. One is to get the combined list, and then the other is to come in and figure out the group specific lists that we need. So hopefully that answers your question. Thanks, Rob. jumping to pricing quickly. So the last step here I wanted to share was just sort of the different options that we have. And we have a few different options here. I ran through a lot of these features, which are the rows that you'll see here. So you can kind of decide which ones are most relevant for you, and then which version of Wholesum kind of fits your needs the best. And in addition to choosing which version of these fits your needs the best, you can also choose between monthly or annual. So if you've got an annual operation, you can just subscribe once, it'll be billed annually. And if you want to do monthly, because you're a seasonal operation, it'll be a little bit more per month, but it'll be charged monthly, and then you can pause it at any time and come back when you need it. All of your data will still be there. So if you just need it for 3 or 4 months a year, this is probably a better option. And if you're going to be using it and adjusting it and adding recipes year long, going the annual route might make more sense.
We do find some folks might want the annual plan, even if they aren't always 12 months out of the year, leading or feeding meals, because they want to go in the off season, update their recipes or tweak their inventory list. And then for those who do have shorter seasons, signing up 2 or 3 months or 1 month in advance to do some of that kind of prep work or cleanup work prior to the season starting. So that's one way people navigate those options. We do find at least some amount of off-season planning is always helpful, just to make sure you've got as updated and clean information there as possible.
Yeah. One other thing to clarify that that I should mention is that this is a per organization cost. So you are welcome to use the same login with multiple users. If you've got 2 or 3 people at the organization that are going to be getting into Wholesum and using it, you can share that login information if you're comfortable doing so. If you're not comfortable doing so and you want to have separate logins, we can also accommodate that. That's this multiple users section. And if you'd like to add multiple logins, you can for an additional cost. The real power of this is, yes, you can use multiple logins with different usernames and passwords, but you can also use this as a way to limit access, whether that's because you want to give a seasonal staff member some limited access, but you don't want them to mess with your recipes, for example. You can set up a user that's just allowed to, create and edit meal plans. Or if you've got different regions that you're working and you want to just give them access to specific meal plan folders, you can set up access for users to just edit and create within specific folders, but not the broader account. So it's completely optional. You're welcome to just set up one user, but if you want to do additional users to limit that access or kind of control who can edit and delete and change, you can add those as well. So that can be really helpful too. With that, unless there are other questions, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I wanted to just say thank you and drop my contact information here. You're welcome to reach out at any time. If you or your organization want to do a one-on-one demo to think through your exact business process and purchasing process and recipes, I'm happy to connect to help you with that. You're welcome to shoot any questions that come up afterwards to this email or give us a call. There is a 2-week free trial that you can set up if you haven't already at wholesum.app, and it doesn't require any credit card information. It's just a free trial to test it out, and you can always upgrade this to a paid account should you decide you want to continue with it. And the last thing I'll say is spread the word. We're a really small business. We've been at it for 9 years and have had a lot of fun kind of trying to crack this nut for the industry, and cracking the nut of getting the word out there is always even harder than the technical solutions. So to the extent that you're comfortable doing so, reach out to anybody else in the industry and point them our way. We're happy to help. Our goal is to kind of make this process easier for everybody who's planning food for groups and reduce the food waste and hopefully save some money and some time in the process too. Thank you everybody for joining. Yeah, Grace. jump on in.
I was just going to add along those lines on our website, there is a section called user stories, which you're welcome to check out if you would find something like that helpful. But that's just kind of some testimonials, some folks kind of speaking to how Wholesome has impacted the day-to-day work of folks who are planning meals for groups. So that's a resource you can check out as well, or you could, point other friends in the industry toward if seeing some examples of how folks have been impacted and found value in Wholesome is helpful for them. So yeah, we've worked really hard to get all the technical specs to get you the most efficient meal planning possible, but we are not marketing and sales experts. So we really do appreciate it when we hear from folks that they heard it from a friend, and word of mouth is one of the things that we've been really happy to see how Wholesome grows over time. But yeah, we just kind of appreciate you taking the time today, and appreciate you passing on the word if you like it.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Um, I'll send out, make sure I can send out a copy of this presentation to all of you all here either today or tomorrow, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Happy to help. Thanks everybody.